Hello. Hello. I hope you're having a wonderful day. I hope that you are enjoying your time scrolling through YouTube content. Look, this week we got some big stuff going on. When it comes to Amazon, the Rings of Power, when it comes to Middle Earth, it's been a busy couple weeks leading up to the Rings of Power coming out in just 2 days, the day after tomorrow. It's going to be released to the world, Rings of Power Season 2. And the internet's all buzzed. I mean, there's so much going on the internet right now around the Rings of Power and around Middle Earth. And I just want to take this stream. I want to take these videos, and I want to dedicate some time to it because I really care about Rings of Power. And not for the reasons like on the face. I care about the original story of the Rings of Power, not this abomination of a show. I care about Tolkien's vision for what the show and what this story is meant to be. Now, with that, there's the lead character pretty much of this show is Galadriel. Interesting choice. When there are so many characters, when there is so much going on, they chose to choose Galadriel as the lead character of this show. And I'm not going to say that's necessarily a wrong choice. I would look at the timeline of the story they're telling in Middle Earth in the Second Age when the Rings of Power are being made and understand that, well, if you're going to choose Galadriel, there's not like a ton that's going on around that time with Galadriel. She is traveling, right? She's married. She has a child, and she's being Galadriel. But this show chose to just completely rewrite her story and to change this character fundamentally. And that's what I want to break down. I'm going to be covering a few areas of the character of Galadriel. I'm going to be looking at what the creators of the Rings of Power, as well as reactions to the show, had to say about Galadriel, the character. I'm also going to be taking a look at what the actor, Morfydd Clark, had to say about the character and the fan reaction, right, to her Galadriel. So I hope you enjoy this. I'm going to jump right into the first bit, the first article we're going to take a look at. So the Rings of Power, I swear, feels like it was made for Swifties, for moms who watch TV in the evenings and just want a good love story drama. You know what I mean? When I say Swifties, I'm talking about the ladies and the girls that are obsessed with love drama. There's nothing wrong with a good love story. There's nothing wrong with a good rom-com. And there's nothing wrong with a good love drama. I'm not going to begrudge that. However, we've taken this multifaceted story that Tolkien has crafted, the events of an entire world with hundreds, thousands of characters moving across the span of centuries, right? And they decided to kind of make it weird. I understand that season 2, they've announced that there's going to be a bunch of battles. There's going to be a lot of man stuff, I guess. But that's not where they started from, because if you look at the fan reactions, everyone's just shipping from last season Galadriel and Sauron, which is the weirdest bastardization of these characters and the motivation that Tolkien originally meant for this. And I'm not going to say that, I don't want to say that the creators intended to do this, but the creators intended to do this pretty much. So if you take a look at this article from Collider that was released 3 days ago, it's titled, "The Rings of Power Season 2 is fully leaning into enemies to lovers, and I'm not mad about it." This is the same thing we saw with the Acolyte, with being seduced by the dark side, with Chimere and OSHA and the sexual tension and the love story between good and evil, right? That's so weird. It's so anti the actual good versus evil of the story of Middle Earth and Galadriel and Sauron that it's wrong. It feels disappointing to consider in this manner. And I'm going to read through some of this article because I'll be honest, it's quite upsetting to hear people reacting to this like, oh, this is a wonderful thing. This is not a wonderful thing. This is cringy, man. This is very cringy. So, one of the master strokes of The Lord of the Rings of Power Season 1 is the dynamic between Galadriel and Halbrand, or as we know him, Sauron. Those names have become pop culture staples since basically, the Peter Jackson trilogy or, the books, I guess. Galadriel played in those by Kate Blanchett represented serene wisdom. Sauron, eerily voiced by Alan Howard, conjured images of greed, molten lava, and feral rage. Setting the characters against one another feels like a mission statement. From the Rings of Power showrunner J.D. Payne and Patrick McKay. Existing fans know which character embodies good and which personifies evil. What happens when the two meet as equal and oppositual forces to start. Their interactions strengthen the tale. Payne and McKay are weaving out of Tolkien's extensive mythology. Forgive me for my lack of ability to read. So the reaction in this is basically, we really like the love story between good and evil. It makes it interesting. It's fresh. It's new. But all it comes across as cringy because this is a out of place type of story that's honestly kind of like a depraved love story, if we're being honest. It's the girl wants to be with the bad boy scenario. And it's not a good look at all for a good versus evil epic where there is drama, there is love stories, never, of course, even insinuating in the books that Sauron and Galadriel ever encountered each other in such a manner that they even got to know each other on any kind of deep emotional level, even spent significant time with each other. Never. I think it's and so you get into the whole thing with Anatar, right? So we know season 2, Anatar is going to be brought up. Galadriel in the books, for people who are wondering, is nowhere near Celebrimbor and is actually with her daughter, and she's married, and she is very skeptical of Sauron. She sees through, she is wise, and she sees through the deception of Sauron disguised as Anatar when they're making the Rings of Power. From a distance, she basically says, hey, we should distance ourselves. This feels wrong. I don't trust this Anatar fellow, right? Where Celebrimbor is just kind of blinded by the powers and the ability that he's discovering through the secrets of forging and creating magic that Anatar is bestowing upon him. And they don't listen to her pleas. So I'm not going to say that season 2 is not going to try to right some of these wrongs. But what I am going to say is that even if they are trying to calibrate these characters to be more positioned in the story with what actually happens in the events of Middle Earth, you're a season 2 late. We keep hearing these articles about the creators and the actors, the cast, saying there was a lot of setup that needed to happen in season 1. Well, all that it feels like to me is you set up a bunch of garbage because you set up nothing that's based in lore. And with Galadriel specifically, it's incredibly disappointing that they chose to make her this naive um, girl boss, I guess, where she can basically fight. She can, you know, best all of the Numenorian men. And yet at the same time, she's wise, but doesn't know what she wants. So she jumps off a ship in the middle of the ocean and gets rescued by Sauron. And and then this whole emotional connection they make all through season one is so silly and so corroding of the foundation of who Galadriel is as a character, all for the sake of saying, like, let's present, because this is interesting, let's present the idea that Sauron is so powerful to be able to deceive Galadriel and actually get her to feel some kind of emotion and feeling toward him, to when he reveals who he is, he propositions that they will can rule over Middle Earth as the most powerful beings, as king and queen. And they literally, the writers just thought of that and said, "Oh, that's interesting. Let's try that. That would be fun, wouldn't it?" Without even considering the fact that fans kind of want to see a story that's consistent with existing source material, that's consistent with what Professor Tolkien's vision of this story would be, what he spent a lot of time keeping track of and writing down, and what people online like Nerd of the Rings have in great detail ironed out in video form, all of the details about these characters and where they were in Middle Earth at what time and what were their motivations and how did Tolkien describe them in the books. And the writers just completely sidestepped that because they were more interested in telling an interesting story about a girl coming of age, right? And that's very disappointing, especially at this time in Middle Earth. If you wanted to tell a love story, you would need to go back to like the first age and tell the story of when she met her husband. Tell the story of coming of age of when she left Valinor and what wanted to see Middle Earth and on all of that, where elves fought it, where elves would be fighting elves, right? That whole conflict. You can get into her coming of age, but at this point in the show, in this when the show's taking place in the history of Middle Earth, when the rings of power were being made in the second age, she's already like somewhere in the realm of 3,400 years old. And yet they're trying to make her like this sweet coming of age, kind of like she falls for the bad boy kind of situation. And the people that are apologizing and saying that, like this article where they say, I'm not mad about it. I am. I don't give a crap who you are. Who wrote this? Kelsey Matson? Who gives a crap? She's not even a Tolkien fan. Oh, hold on. This is very interesting. Hypothetical master's degree in all things Taylor Swift. I called it. I called it. I called it. This show was made for Swifties. Ha! I called it, man. I'm gonna be honest with you all. I wrote this title of this video before I saw this. I promise, I crossed my heart. I did not plan that. I didn't even look up who Kelsey was who wrote this article. That was just something I decided to do. I did not know. My goodness. Yeah, this show's made for Swifties, dude. This show is made for Swifties because the only people that are happy about this nonsense, Sauron and Galadriel being shipped, having this weird romance, are the people who are fans of Taylor Swift. The people that love a good dramatic, tragic love story. And it's disrespectful. It's disrespectful to Galadriel as a character. It's honestly disrespectful to Sauron, the villain of the story. It's disrespectful to him. And it's disrespectful to everybody who's dedicated their free time and their enjoyment of Tolkien's work. Heck, it's disrespectful to not only the fans who read the books, it's disrespectful to like Peter Jackson and all the people who made the original films when they show up ready to tell a story where to the best of their ability, they make a movie honoring the novels that Tolkien wrote and the characters and the values that Tolkien cared about. It's disrespectful that a show, Amazon Prime, just buys up the TV rights because that's all they have. They only have the TV rights to the Lord of the Rings books. So everything is based on the appendices of Return of the King, which is about the book's like that thick, depending on which copy you have. If the book's about that thick, the appendices are about that thick, right? So it's like 200 or so pages of history of Middle Earth, right? And that's all they have to work on when it comes to telling his stories. And I'm not going to say that's not enough, actually, because it is quite a bit. You can build a story around that and remain consistent with the lore. But this is made for not fans of Tolkien, not fans of people who care about stories of good versus evil, not fans of people who enjoy love stories in the appropriate place that are motivated from a good, wholesome place. And it's not made for fans who really want that drama and warfare and world building mixed. It's made for Swifties. This show is made for women who just want to see a tragic love story. That's all this is. Man, I'm getting wound up. I'm getting wound up. And I'm curious to hear in the comments. So leave a comment. I'm curious to hear what you all think about season 1 and this aspect of Sauron and Galadriel, coming together, especially when it comes to, we're going to get into some more specifics about Galadriel as a character, but especially when it comes to completely degrading the strong, actually strong and powerful and majestic woman that Galadriel is, the elf woman she is, and the history she has that's tragic and beautiful and inspirational. And yes, has some twists and turns, and yes, mistakes along the way. But during this point in history, no. No. And also with Sauron, no. No. There's never an account where she fell in love with anyone who was anywhere near evil or even had emotionally connected feelings toward anyone who was associated with evil. And I think it's the wrong move. It's disrespectful, and we shouldn't be seeing this because it's honestly in bad taste. So leave a comment. I want to hear what you guys have to say about this. Want to move on to the next bit. It's actually another interesting article that we have, kind of diving into Morfydd Clark a little bit. But basically, so the creators of Rings of Power never planned to stay true to Tolkien. And we kind of knew that when we watched the show. But when you hear what they have to say and what comments they've made recently, it's clear that they never ever intended to be accurate to Tolkien's work. I'm curious. Let me see if I could pull up that video where they talked about wanting to be accurate to the book, just to use as a comparison, right? Let me take a look to see if I could find this. I don't know. It's kind of an older clip. It was before season 1 came out, so I might not be able to find it. So I can't leave it in here for the live, but for the video, I'll insert it. For the clip, I'll insert it. But the Rings of Power creators never intended to stay true to Tolkien. So I'm going to read a little bit of the process, of their thought process when they were, picking who the lead character of the show was going to be, as well as casting Morfydd Clark, right, to play Galadriel. So the casting of Morfydd Clark in the Rings of Power, the massive Prime Video prequel series, launched to extraordinary fanfare and in some circles, extraordinary derision. In 2022, the Welsh actress Clark, who stretched to the full height, will still need her tiptoes to brush 5'5". Didn't even fit the canonical stature of Galadriel, the elven lady of the wood. In Tolkien's book, she's somewhere around the realm of 6'4". So right there, they chose to cast someone that wasn't even close to the stature of Galadriel. They didn't even want to make her appear to look the same. All right. The decision to make Galadriel the lead protagonist of the Rings of Power was a day one, minute one choice for the creative team, McKay tells me. Watching Blanchett's statuely Galadriel, they sought to understand, what if you go back thousands of years before the Jackson films? Okay, before the Jackson films. I don't know if that's an insert or whatever, or if that's a quote. What if you go back thousands of years before the Jackson films and she's on a battlefield with a sword? That was the first image I remember really grabbing onto and going, okay, this could be something so distinct and different from maybe what people are expecting. But subverting fan expectations would not be an easy feat, particularly when the actress they selected to do so completely changed our conception of the character, McKay says. So right there, this is their coming out story of saying, we want Galadriel to be the main character right off the bat. Day one, minute one, Galadriel's the main character. I wonder what went into that thought process. Was it literally, who is a memorable character to do member berries in, so we don't have to introduce a new character, so we don't have to do the legwork of trying to get the fan buy-in or the non-fan buy-in, and we could just do a recognizable name from the Peter Jackson trilogy. It's got to be an elf. Who are the strong women elves? Because we got to have a woman elf. This can't be about Elrond. No way. This absolutely cannot be about Elrond. He's a dude. Who's the strong female character that would be around? We know Galadriel. You know what would be an interesting choice? What if instead of her being majestic and tall, like the book says she is, and being a powerful leader, being a formidable enemy to Sauron, in the books, Sauron sees Galadriel as the only opponent in Middle-earth that is truly a threat to him. What if, instead of her being that, we just put her in a battlefield with a sword? What if we just make her a warrior boss? Again, this subverting the lore to try to make a powerful woman a younger version of herself. So a girl who's 3,400 years old at this point in the Second Age. And we want her to act like a man. We want her to act like a warrior dude because yeah, we just don't want the womanly figure. We don't want a powerful woman who can literally destroy entire areas with her conjuring and magic and her power. We want her to be blunt force with a sword fighting. We want her to be looking like a man on the battlefield. They literally downgraded her strong femininity as a character to make her look more like a man. Tell me if I'm the one who's misogynist. Kind of sounds to me like we're going to put front and center a female character, not just a female character, a beloved, probably the female character of the Middle Earth story, the Middle Earth history, like the female character. And we're going to downgrade her from the high stature, literally, but also reputationally, that she's at to make her more of like a layman, to make her more like a soldier and less authoritative. Less authoritative. That's crazy to me. But from day one, minute one, that was their intention because they thought it would be interesting. It would be what people are not expecting, right? It would be, this could be something so distinct and different from maybe what people are expecting. Since when you're doing an adaptation of a book or an existing IP with plenty of story and history and canon behind it, that you say, we're going to do that because we paid a lot of money for this and we want the baked in fan base. And so the first choice, day one, minute one, we want to fundamentally change a character that everybody loves. Because it would be what they're not expecting. My goodness, how stupid do you have to be? Let's see. So yeah, they talked about the audition process of Morfydd Clark. The second Morfydd Clark spoke, it was over for us. Weber wrote in an email, she has a timelessness about her. She seems both young and impossibly wise and self-assured at the same time. First off, she doesn't need to look young. She can look middle-aged. She's going to live for thousands of years. She's already been at this point 3,400 plus years old, at least. Why does she need to look young? It's like they're like, how many years is it between the Rings of Power being created and the events of the Fellowship of the Ring? Oh, it's something like thousands of years. Okay, let's go ahead and make her look younger because it's a lot of time that's passed. They didn't even consider, when was she born? Well, they got one thing right. She was born in Valar, that's correct. No, Valinor, that was correct. But they didn't even take to consider that maybe she should look middle-aged, because at a certain point, elves, once they reach maturity, kind of just plateau in how they look for a really long time. But no, they had to make her look young. They had to make her act young, as if she's not learned any big life lessons at all in the past 3,000 and a half years. It helps, of course, that Clark is naturally mimic the voice of the ancient fantastical creature, whatever. This is about her background in Wales, where she comes from, and how English is hard for her to speak. But when she does it with an accent, as if or when she speaks, Elvish, everyone thinks she's amazing. But the zealous praise of her castmates and crew couldn't protect Clark when the Rings of Power hit Prime Video. Almost exactly 2 years ago, fan reactions were immediately inescapable and intense. Audiences review bombed the series across Rotten Tomatoes, Galadriel, and by extension Clark, incited fury for reasons both legitimate and obtuse. And I'll be honest with you, I've read this ahead of time. I agree with almost everything that's being said here. There's a little bit at the bottom I don't agree with. That's just them whining. Viewers denounced Clark's appearance for not being lore accurate. They railed against the character's penchant for rage, arguing she acted like the worst immature teenager. That's correct. They claimed she was annoying. Correct. Because she was so annoying. She just was like, I'm better than everybody. I can kill an orc in under 5 seconds. And nobody else can. All my bannermen. Why did she even have bannermen at the top of season 1? Why didn't she just go by herself if she's so awesome? Unnecessary fan fiction is how they described it. And a drag. Yeah, because she's dumb. She's got nothing going on up here. Her character is written in a very shallow way. Now, here's the thing. I'm not going to dog on Morphet Clark. I will dog if she attacks the fans, but I'm not going, for people who just don't like the show and call them names, but I'm not going to dog on her because I haven't seen her in anything outside of a very poorly written story, a very poorly written script. So I don't know if she can actually act well or not. I don't know. Different than, like, you know, Amandla Stanberg from The Acolyte, who's just a plank of wood. She doesn't know how to emote worth anything. But I'm not going to dog on Morphet Clark because maybe she is really trying, but the writing and the dialogue is so crap that she doesn't know how to deliver it correctly. That might be the case. I don't know. Her lack of behavior resembles the Blanchette's millennia older version of the elf. Elon Musk, this is actually hilarious. Elon Musk took to Twitter to target Galadriel for getting to be the only brave and smart and nice character, while the male characters are all cowards, jerks, or both. He also claimed Tolkien is turning in his grave. 100% agree, Elon. 100% agree. Others published paragraphs about why Galadriel needed to be seen with her family in order for the show's timeline to make sense. One writer published a Forbes essay claiming Clark's Galadriel was an unlikable protagonist who lacks basic social skills. Correct. And what's interestingly enough is that's how she comes across. And honestly, that's how she's written. But what's funny is in the recent interviews with the actors and creators of season 2, they are saying things like this. So it's like they don't even understand. They don't even understand what the character of Galadriel is supposed to be. Listen to this really quickly and how he describes Galadriel in passing.
As the great deceiver, kind of gets to do both. Mm-hmm. You get to see him be a version of himself that can deceive someone as wise and brilliant as Galadriel, but at the same time
as wise and brilliant as Galadriel. They say that it is important that they set up Sauron as being a deceiver, which he is. As when he's Anatar, he deceives Celebrimbor. That's all correct, right? But what's funny is they reference that he's deceiving Galadriel, who's supposed to be very wise and powerful at this point. But the writers decided to be like, let's put her in the battlefield and put a sword in her hand. Let's make her young and naive. 3,400-year-old young naive elf. Yeah, and she lacked basic social skills. I agree 100% with these comments, especially Elon's. Many such opinions were articulated thoughtfully, leading to the nuanced debate over Tolkien's text. Yes, which is what we should be doing. It's crazy to me that the creators cannot open any text or quote that Tolkien has ever made. Like, give us one quote that Tolkien made that gives you any room to do what you've done to his story, right? People were complaining, right, about how he spelled the word dwarves in his books, right? And he said, his response was, I assisted in writing the dictionary. which is true. Do not lecture me on how I choose to spell dwarves in my story in a fictitious world. He has the right to do that. He also made a comment about why people's the age-old question, why did they just not ride the eagles to Mordor? And he responded with, I actually can't remember how he responds. That would actually be fun to pull up. Let me pull that up. Let's see, Tolkien. Mordor. Okay, listen to this real quick. Let's see. Check this out.
And I actually have here a letter written to me by a fellow who's very, very fond of the Lord of the Rings. And he asked me in the letter.
So someone wrote him a letter. He's very fond of the Lord of the Rings. All right, and this is the question he asked in the letter.
Why they didn't just fly the eagles into Mordor? And I told him I get this same question. The people run into me at the pub and ask why didn't they just fly the eagles to Mordor? It would have made the quest a whole lot easier. And I told him the same thing that I'm telling you right now. Shut up.
That's pretty good. That's the kind of guy who wrote this story. And so, no, it's not interesting to fundamentally change a character. And yes, it does. It does. I believe the winning side of the debate over Tolkien's text always lies with what has been written down. And if you divert from that, you better have a really good reason. I wouldn't say all of the choices Peter Jackson and the creators of his trilogy I agree with when they made the Lord of the Rings and what things they chose to not fundamentally change but edit out of the story. I wouldn't agree with all of them. But the thing is, they started from a place that was, what did Tolkien care about? We want to communicate those values, and the movements of the story are consistent with the movements of the book. I've read the books. I have watched those films. I am watching this piece of garbage from Amazon Prime, and they don't compare. They don't compare in respect in the slightest. In the slightest. All right, so they go on. But too often, the attacks were little more than misogyny and anti-wokeness dressed up as loyalty to source material. Now, I've already said it. No misogyny from here. Galadriel, let me just say this. Galadriel was perfect the way she was written in the history of this timeline. If you wanted to tell a young Galadriel story, you should be back in the First Age during the process of her coming to Middle-earth. You might have a little bit more leeway in writing her character because she actually was a bit younger then. But no, you chose to write her at, post-Enlightenment Galadriel, And the creators were saying the super wise Galadriel, but this show is not portraying her as wise, not wide either, but also not wise. They're portraying her as lacking basic social skills, annoying, right? and a drag. That's how they're describing her. And so, no, it's not misogyny. And I'm not going to say that there wasn't anybody that has said misogynist things. I'm just going to say it's probably the tiniest of fractions of people on the internet that has boiled it down to misogyny because she's a woman. First off, I'm not mad at Galadriel as a character or choosing to make her a lead role. I'm more upset at the establishment of Hollywood, where every single movie and show has to have a female lead because they're trying to make up for time lost. I don't have a problem with saying let's make more female leads. I have no problem with that. If everything has to be that, and you want to make Galadriel a main character, then tell her story in the First Age. During the Rings of Power, when those were created, yes, she receives one of those rings, but she is not the main character around the deception of Sauron in the story. She's not even close geographically to where the rings are being made, and even close geographically to when Anatar, Sauron, is working with Celebrimbor for like 50 years or something crazy like that. It's a long time. She is married and with her daughter on like a, I think they're on the other side of the Misty Mountains, if I'm remembering correctly. They're not even, they're blocked off by an entire landscape and mountainous region. So, yeah, the creators never intended. They never intended to do right by this story. They never intended to stay true to Tolkien. And I'm just going to say, like, look, if you want to change his story, I just got to say, you know, the same thing that he had to say about it if you're trying to change his story.
Right now, you know, shut up.
That's what I would say. Shut up. Shut the heck up, man. Because we don't want this crappy story. Start over, cancel it, abandon ship, and stop putting out this garbage. This is absolute garbage. Stop trying to subvert the expectations of the audience. Give us what we want, or tell a brand new story that you wrote. I'm going to get into a little bit more of this article. So getting into more of the response, of the backlash of the Rings of Power Season 1, as we set up for Rings of Power Season 2, they can expect a similar backlash, honestly, but they're basically now crying about being victims of the Tolkien fans. And in this article, the creators, as well as the Rings of Power star, is basically crying about this, acting like they're a victim of Tolkien fans and calling everything just misogyny and racism when that's not the case. So I can't necessarily debunk with paperwork and proof that everything they said when they talk about, like, you know, threats and stuff. I would say no comments I've seen online are threats. The harshest thing I have said is shut up and stop making a story and changing everything that's not yours. Just because you paid a monetary value for it does not make it yours. It belongs to Tolkien, the writer, and the fans of his work. So stop trying to subvert it. That's the harshest thing I've said. I've actually said, you know, about Morfydd Clark, I've said about her that I don't know if she's a good actor. I haven't seen her in anything else. Not that I'm remembering. All I know is the writing is horrible and it's disrespectful, and there's nothing interesting about the writing. So maybe she could be giving it her all, but I haven't seen people threatening her. But listen to what they are crying about. All right. So this is some quotes from her as well as other people. I was just totally unprepared when season 1 came out, Clark said. When I was asked about this early reaction period, I've seen a really dark side of what it means to be someone who can write a message on Instagram, and a really lovely side. So basically, she's saying, I guess her reviews that she saw were coming to her on Instagram or whatever. I would stay off Instagram personally if I was you, Clark. I would just hang out on YouTube and text your friends. And of course, read reviews of your show so you know if the fans actually like it or not. But you knew that they weren't going to like it before you started. The lovely side, the positive fan interactions, bore Clark through the negativeness primarily from men. She argues that lots of the criticism I got from some fans were for the things making other people feel liberated while watching Galadriel. So complaining about men like me being critical of the character she's playing. But just because you're a woman doesn't mean you own the right to the character, nor do the creators own the right to the character to fundamentally change it. We're not saying the negativeness primarily are from men. First off, the primary fandom of the Lord of the Rings and Tolkien's work are men. I'm not going to say that's a blanket statement, but the ones that care the most about it, like how many, talk about Instagram, how many like reels or on TikTok have you seen about guys who were like trying to get my wife to watch the Lord of the Rings extended edition, trying to get my girlfriend to watch the Lord of the Rings extended. How many memes have you seen about that? It's because there's the stereotype that is based in some reality that a majority of the fandom and the enthusiasts around this IP are men. So yeah, the ones that are going to put up the largest fight are going to be the men. And I'm not going to say, I've seen women online hate on the show as well. All right. But you have to also live in reality and understand that if you're doing a show that the primary audience is men, you're going to hear negative and probably positive reviews from primarily men, because those are the primary ones who tried the content, who actually watched the thing. Although the show was made for Swifties, it's not being watched by Swifties. For every viewer who couldn't stand Galadriel's all-consuming drive in season 1, there was another who found it thrilling, even empowering. What certain people didn't necessarily enjoy about her, other people did, Clark says. She takes up space. She's unapologetic. She didn't want her to act like a human woman who's been taught not to be abrasive. Look, I don't know. Abrasive's not necessarily a positive quality and definitely not one that's described as Galadriel in the books. But I'm not going to say that unapologetic and taking up space is not a that's not a bad thing. The problem is you did it in a way that was annoying and not the way Galadriel actually does. The real Galadriel takes up space because she's powerful, she's respected, she's a ruler, she's a leader. Multiple times throughout her long, long life, people wanted her to be queen over a certain part of Middle Earth, and she rejected the desire to be queen. And Celeborn, her husband, was also asked to be king, by the way. But no, it is not a problem to take up space and be unapologetic. That's not what the fans are asking you to do. We just don't want you to be intolerable and annoying. And that's what you did. You completely slaughtered the writers, and your performance slaughtered the vision and the expectation from the Tolkien canon, the Tolkien lore, what's documented of who Galadriel was and what she was doing. And abrasive is not a good word. No, Galadriel is not abrasive. She continues, every other character I've played, because they're human women, there's shame built in. Galadriel doesn't have that. I'm glad I committed to that. So shame built in. Yeah, you're right. Galadriel doesn't have shame built in. But the thing is, you're already lying because we're going into season 2. At the end of season 1, you were very ashamed as a character. They literally wrote your character to be duped by Sauron. And according to the show, everything that he does, all of his power, when he gets thousands and thousands of people killed, it's your fault. Now, it's not in Tolkien's writings. It's not it's not Galadriel's fault, but in your show, it's your fault. So there should be shame built into your version of Galadriel. There should be. This is one of the creators. Payne argues this shamelessness made the most sense for the young Galadriel. She's not young. She's not young. At this point, she's over 3,400 years old. Of Tolkien's Second Age. My goodness. Still thousands of years before the wise and magisterial woman depicted in Jackson's films. She's not just depicted in Jackson's film. That's not the foundation of what we're going off here. Stop referring to Jackson's film. Start referring to the book. But you can't because you got built-in shame because you know what you did. You just went entirely away from it and told everybody before the season 1 came out that you were going back to the book and back to the book. She's supposed to be wise and majestic at this point. We just had one of the creators reference her as wise, and now the creator is referencing her as young, and we're going to see her turn into the wise and majestic, magisterial version of Galadriel. So they don't even know who she is. They're just complaining that people don't like the show and calling everybody names and accusing them of women hate. Women depicted in Jackson films, themselves set during the Third Age. In the author's writings, Tolkien gives us hints that Galadriel was prideful and that she was a warrior at various times in her history. Payne said, we said, how can we take her from being an impetuous, prideful young warrior to a wise lady of the woods? I've already said this, but I'm going to say, if you want to do a prideful, young warrior version of Galadriel, warrior, she fought, and yes, she is powerful, but not in the hand-to-hand combat you so are eager to jump to, but prideful young warrior that turns into the wise lady, you need to do it in the First Age. The process of Galadriel coming to Middle-earth is the point in time in history to tell that story. Give me 1 second. I need to get some water. Her coming to Middle-earth when there was a really big uprising, when elves battled against elves, when she left Valinor. That is when she was young and prideful and desired to see Middle-earth, and she wanted to go there, right? That's more of the time when you should be telling the story, but you're deciding to make it way into the history through the entire First Age, most of the Second Age. She's already supposed to be the wise lady. Excuse me. So I don't understand this obsession with a coming-of-age story during the times of when the rings were created. She should have built-in shame because she messed up in your story. Here's some more quotes. Galadriel needed to be what some viewers might call unlikable in season 1. Clark's Galadriel befriends the seemingly human Halbrand, played by Clark's real-life friend, Charlie Vickers. In the final episode, the finale episode, Halbrand reveals his true identity. He is the legendary villain Sauron. Yes, we saw that coming from like as soon as he was introduced on the screen. Whom Galadriel has been intent on destroying from the beginning. Also, the whole idea of her on a revenge kick against Sauron to try to avenge her brother. Yes, her brother was killed. But no, she never went on a 1,000-year search for Sauron. No, she was married. She was doing life. She was traveling around. She wasn't on a quest for years and years to try to find Sauron in this revenge task that she gave to herself. Galadriel realizes it was her own abstinence and thirst of vengeance that set her in her enemy's trap. Inadvertently, she has helped him return to power. Yeah, so shame should be built in. It's fun. It's fun to think about what Galadriel's unlikable decision led to. Would Sauron have found his way to power so quickly if she didn't help him? Weber writes. Or will it turn out in the end that she might be able to defeat him one day because she helped him and got to know him in the process? These are the kinds of delightful, dramatic questions that come from having an imperfect character. Again, this show's made for Swifties. It's the weird falling for the bad boy and then ultimately, and being a victim of the bad boy, going through the emotions of that. And then in the end, overcoming the bad boy, getting revenge ultimately. It's a great dramatic story. It's what the Swifties love about Taylor Swift's music. And it's what they're trying to do here. It's obvious why no one likes the show who's actually a fan of Tolkien. And everybody who leaves comments, who are writing reviews, like in Collider, and who are making reaction videos because they can't, I'm not going to dog too heavily on reaction content, but they don't actually leave any commentary. They just kind of be like, what an exciting trailer. No, they're not actually they don't have an actual critical thought because they're not actually fans of Lord of the Rings and Tolkien. They just saw the movies once, and it's going to get them eyeballs if they talk about it on TikTok or in, blogs and stuff. And everyone's so quick to jump on the woke train, on the DEI hires and the DEI decision making for a story like this. So I think that's about all I'm going to cover tonight. It's been a long stream. For those who jumped in, I appreciate it. Let me know in the comments what you guys think about this. Is it just come across as sad? Does it come across as frustrating, infuriating, the fact that they're playing the victim when they are the ones that have crucified a beloved story that you love? Tell me that doesn't just make you angry. To tell a story to pander to Swifties, man. I'm just going to point this out one more time because honestly, this is crazy to me. The fact that I called this early and titled my video, The Rings of Power is Made for Swifties. And the one who wrote this article that is shipping Sauron and Galadriel, Kelsey Matson, claims to be someone earning a hypothetical master's degree in all things Taylor Swift. I cannot believe I called that beforehand. I called it. That's crazy. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I really appreciate your time. And I hope to see you on another live stream. We're going to be talking about Rings of Power, the entire rollout. And we're going to be doing a stream late around 9 p.m. Eastern time on Thursday. Lord willing and the creek don't rise. We're going to be we're going to be here talking about the first 3 episodes of season 2. So check us out, subscribe to the channel, and appreciate you. We'll see you next time.